Fisher, attorney Rachel Taimanao-Ayuyu, and attorney Jacque Terlaje. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chris.
This is kind of sounding like good morning. This is kind of sounding like the beginning of a lawyer. So 3 lawyers walk into a Zoom room, and well, we had a story that had come out as Superior Court of Guam Judge Elise Iriarte shot down Public Health's motion to reconsider her decision to award attorney's fees to several individuals who were forced into government quarantine last year. As a result, the judge awarded attorney's fees to those individuals while holding off a decision on others. In a recent decision, the judge also criticized Public Health for failing to inform these individuals of their legal rights before being forced into government quarantine. Not only did Public Health not inform them of their rights, but they also did not provide them with legal counsel despite being ordered by the court to do so. Here, and this is the judge's order, here Public Health demonstrated a pattern disregarding its obligations to provide counsel and then disobeying and obstructing the court's orders, which afforded that same right. Judge Iriarte also noted the fact that even 14 months into the pandemic, Public Health has not made any effort to develop a public health emergency plan that would implement a mechanism for the appointment of counsel at the government's expense. So that was you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that both Jackie and Rachel would agree. We've all been in, you add it all up, I'm sure we've had 80 years of experience practicing law on Guam.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've ever seen a decision holding that the government was obstructing justice. I'll pass the ball to Jackie and Rachel. I've never seen that before. That is a remarkable thing for the court to hold. I'm sure that's got the attention of the people over at the Attorney General's office.
Yes. I would agree with Tom. I've been practicing here. Okay, I won't say how long, right? How about Tom? I've been practicing here for over 20 years, and I don't recall any case where the court has said the government has not only been obstructive, but that they clearly and intentionally disobeyed a direct order from the court. And then on top of that, they also basically created the circumstance so that people were left in a quarantine without being able to understand what their legal rights are. Kind of a horrible situation, at least the way the court describes it, and what we experienced, because we were the ones who were sitting through the trial. And this is right on. I mean, this is the way that we saw exactly what was happening in the quarantine process.
I'm going to have to agree with my co-counsels here. And I would say also that I've never seen, in my experience, I think between the 3 of us, I'm the most junior of these 2 esteemed attorneys that are with us here this morning. But in my decade long of practice, I've not seen a decision like this as well. It's not to say that the government has not acted similarly in other cases, but to have the decision actually outline the behavior of the government through the Attorney General's office, to me, it's telling. And I think I can speak for my clients when I say that they feel now, almost a year later, that justice is being realized, that their freedoms were infringed upon, and basically they had to silently suffer for days. At some point, there was a 14-day mandatory quarantine in these facilities, and they were silent in that it was not going before the court. But I do want to take the moment right now to thank the media and KUAM. I want to really kind of give credit where credit is due here, because the decision actually states that the case of Robert Shaw was the first kind of case that came before the court after the Philippines petition back in April of 2020. And that was brought on by Attorney Fisher, and only brought to our attention because of the media coverage on Mr. Shaw's family crisis and emergency and the purpose.
He was coming back for a funeral, right?
Yeah.
Coming back for a funeral. And man, that just pains me because like I understand the role of quarantine, and given the number of cases that we caught in the quarantine, I think it has served as and I'm sure you guys might disagree, but I mean, it's been a tool, right? That's probably stopped the spread of COVID, but that doesn't mean that you get to just do it any way you want, right? And I think that this decision for really, because back when this was happening, just to give you guys context, everybody was saying that legally it was off, that it didn't pass the smell test, that, you know, these people's rights were being violated. But at the time, we were all staying home, freaking out, scared. And so people kind of thought like, oh, well, the government's just doing what they have to do. But to see that it didn't hold up in the courts, to me, just what makes me think about all the other things that have been done during this pandemic that, given the scrutiny or their day in court, will also not hold up.
Well, Chris, I guess there's a couple things I'd like to add. Rachel really kind of brought home what this is really about, and that is the rights of the people of Guam. This decision didn't just say, well, you know, the government was dragging their feet. This decision cited and noted that the government was actively working against the liberty interests of the people. I mean, that is that's absolutely fundamental. And then you made an observation, which is very true, that, you know, we were all in a sense locked down, and some still are. But, you know, there's that old aphorism that, you know, if you're going to, you know, somebody who will sacrifice liberty for safety deserves neither. This was an incident in which the Attorney General of Guam, in receipt of a judge's order, defied it and actually obstructed the execution of the order. You know, maybe this is a little bit inside baseball, but for lawyers, that is absolutely stunning. You know, when we all came into the bar, we promised to uphold the Constitution of the United States as well as the Organic Act of Guam. And these folks come marching in and decide that they are not going to respect the Constitution, and they're not going to respect the judiciary. It really is a, you know, from a lawyer's perspective, this is a stunning decision.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, it's egregious, right? I mean, that's one of the main things you guys aren't supposed to do is obstruct justice. But what's the remedy, really? I mean, like I said, the government is pretty much, I mean, I feel like, we did what we had to do, and if it was against the law, then, you know, oh, well, you're welcome for saving your life. Right? I mean, so what is going to happen other than this very sternly written decision and order? What's the consequence for the Attorney General's office?
Well, I guess I'll field that unless, you know, Rachel and Jackie, please do jump in. The consequence for the Attorney General's office is they need to straighten up and fly right. It's just, again, you know, I hate to keep running out of adjectives, I guess, but it is just stunning that this happened. We have a right to expect that it will never happen again. I'll tell you what, that's a remedy. And if it does, you know, there are consequences. You know, the courts obviously have contempt powers and so forth and so on, but we also have a right to expect that the Attorney General of Guam is going to do what he or she can to effectuate the laws and do it faithfully and honestly in the interests of the people.
So let's just kind of go back to the beginning, right? Layman's terms, people coming into Guam, and you know the process. Look, my mom was in the quarantine. You come to the airport, they give you a bunch of papers. My mother is not a lawyer. She already knew she's got to go in. And that's just kind of like the reality that I told her was like, yeah, you got to go in. That's it. That's what happens. I mean, we didn't get a lawyer. We didn't do anything. So my mom, you know, was stuck in the quarantine for 6 days until she tested out. What about everyone else who goes in? Like, what? Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
I was going to say, but that wasn't what was happening is the problem. Yeah. And that was the reason why these lawsuits were required, was because people were going to the airport. Travelers were entering into the airport. The court had ordered public health to provide notice to the passengers of their legal rights. And for whatever reason, public health decided that they were not going to tell people about what their rights were. So only if someone knew their rights, right? So it was a chicken before the egg problem. A traveler shows up and says, I object to quarantine. I do not consent. That was when the government gave him, oh, here's notice of your legal rights. But if someone shows up and says, am I required to quarantine? And public health basically responded in the affirmative. Yes, you have to quarantine. No notification of rights. And so that created a tremendous problem, and which is what resulted in kind of many of these different cases, and many in the cases where the court held that public health had in fact violated those passengers' rights, because it's not up to the passenger to object or to know their rights. The whole point was to ensure that people in fact knew what their rights were. And that's what's the most important part of this case, is the fact that people started to understand that they did have a right to say, I am not going to go to this hotel for quarantine. I have medical conditions. I shouldn't be compelled to stay in a hotel room for a 10-day period or 7-day period, right? And your question, I think, was really important. You know, I know instinctively, most people understand that lawyers have obligations, that we expect our lawyers to be at this high standard of practice, of moral responsibility, of social responsibility. And I think all of us, after reading this decision, first of all of us were very concerned, okay? Let's not mince words. All the way when we started this case, we already had concerns about what was happening at the public health level. The clients were clamoring to find out, why is the government acting in this particular way? And so we pursued the cases in this manner, and all of our clients are through the roof with joy at this point, because all of their positions have been essentially, you know, what's the word? Vindicated. They've all been vindicated because they said our rights were not respected. And now the court has confirmed, in fact, that their rights were not respected. So what will we see from the Attorney General? I don't know. I expect to see some action out of the Attorney General's office. My concern is what happened in this case didn't just involve one attorney. It involved junior attorneys. And so I would hope that there would be some form of correction of the circumstance. But that's not up to me. That's up to a different higher authority.
Yeah. What happened? Because I remember early on, like at March, April kind of time frame, when Linda DeNorsi was running public health, we would have interviews with her, and she would be like, "Oh, I got to go run to court because, I mean, I don't even remember really." But was public health at any point adhering to what was legally required?
I guess I'll take this one. When I refer to the April petition, I believe that was the action that Ms. DeNorsi was probably referring to. What the court said, and what all the attorneys in these cases knew, was the government at one point in time tried to comply. Not tried to, they did. They did in that they understood what their legal responsibility was, and they filed a petition for the quarantine. I believe it was in regards to a Philippine flight that came in April. And the court had said in our consolidated cases that, you know, government, you guys knew the law. You did at one point initially fulfill your obligation in coming before the court. And then after that, it was basically silence on their part. And then you're going to have to, you know, I would like to talk about what actually happened after that petition. The government met passengers at the airport and started herding them into single file lines, essentially, supervised by police officers, by airport police, and without mention or explanation of where these clients were going, basically shuttled them to a government facility and told them that they could not leave under penalty of criminal action against them. And so, of course, at that point, by the time we got into the quarantine matters with Robert Shaw and Jean Egros and Attorney Terlaje's clients, there were thousands of people that were treated in this manner, thousands. And that, I think, was the most shocking for me as an attorney coming in, just seeing how basic and how very straightforward the rules were, the law was on what the government should do. In this case, the court said, oh, you need to put together this public health plan. And you knew that because it was a part of the law, as well as the court's reference to it, and as well as the basis of some of our petitions was, look, they didn't even fulfill the most basic requirement to put in place a procedure. And the court made special note of the fact that 14 months has passed. 14 months has passed, and still the government, for whatever reason, has not complied with their most legal obligation in responding to a pandemic such as the coronavirus, which is put together this public health plan so we know what the procedures are to give notice and to appoint counsel. I think that was I was very, very happy to see that in decision and order.
Man, you guys are really you're taking me back to what.
There's another.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up on what Rachel was saying. What they had also done, the court appointed the Public Defender Service Corporation to represent all these people because there were so many people who are affected by this. And they essentially said that the public defenders is supposed to be up there at the airport as they arrive and do what they can to inform these people. But the Attorney General's office and Department of Public Health actually came forward and obstructed, again, the public defender's ability to contact their clients. The Department of Public Health and the Attorney General's office would not turn over the names to the Public Defenders Corporation to represent their own clients. So it's not just a matter of they weren't doing their job or they're just lazy. They actually stood in the way. And that's inexplicable. That's the kind of thing that lawyers wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with breaking out in sweat when they find out that, oh my gosh, maybe I did something that was extraordinarily unethical. I've obstructed the ability of a lawyer to talk to his client. That's, I think both Jackie and Rachel would agree that is, well, I've said it before, but that is a stunning result. It's a stunning event.
Yeah, yet here we are. It's still happening.
We are.
Man, so going back to what you were saying that there were thousands of people affected by this, and I know that, man, unfortunately, Robert Shaw wasn't even the first person that we interviewed on this show about these quarantine issues. Man, we interviewed a woman who came here because her mother was on her deathbed. They wouldn't let her out to see her mother. Her mother died while she was in quarantine. And that's not even the only story like that. There's others where people were coming back and public health's hardship exemption process was just so convoluted, confusing. I don't know, maybe it was on purpose that it was like that. Where you had people who were rotting in quarantine who couldn't go say goodbye to loved ones, couldn't go to a funeral, but you had, cabinet member X just waltzing right out of the airport, So it's definitely been inconsistent. But I mean, at the end of the day, right, isn't the Attorney General, aren't they just going to say oh, we just had to do what we had to do? And is there these similar cases going on in other jurisdictions? Because I know that Guam is one of the few that actually has quarantine, right?
Oh, I guess I'll speak.
Jackie's
Go
ahead, Rach. You're young. You go for it, Rach.
Yeah. Well, we would hope, the most responsible thing to do would be to look at this decision and say, okay, one of the things that we can do as the government and, the Attorney General's office, it's one thing. I want to make a distinction here between my representation of a private client and the Attorney General's office and their representation of a government entity. Really, the Attorney General's office is there for the benefit of all the people of Guam. And the most basic thing that it can do is to ensure that the people of Guam and their rights are being safeguarded. And I understand that the pandemic brought on several very new and never before seen issues, but it's been more than a year. It's been more than a year. This most basic thing, like a public health emergency plan that outlines the legal requirements of notice and the ability, the access to an attorney and the ability and access to go before the court to bring their individual petitions. These are not things that are privileges. These are rights of the people of Guam to be able to do so upon their entry. And I would hope that the Attorney General's office is advising their client, their government client, to comply. I mean, I say hope because it's been our experience in the more than for some of us 10 months of being in these quarantine type cases, that in our experience that that's not usually what happens after the court issues an order. It's not compliance. We've actually had to come back into court several times on different petitions or even the same petition, like in EGROS, to say, hey, look, Judge, they're still not doing what the court ordered them to do. And so this is why I think that the private bar in these matters were so crucial in changing the way things were being done. Now, I don't know, we'll see, Chris, because again, like the CDC recommendation is not to quarantine.
Yeah, I want to ask
vaccinated.
about that. But we had a comment here from Jay. Let's get to the point with the decision made by the court to release residents in quarantine going forward. Is it unconstitutional to quarantine people, and should quarantine be abolished in your legal opinion?
Well, the question is it unconstitutional for a governor to put a person in the instance of a public health emergency to put them in quarantine? That question, the best way to characterize it is that is unsettled. The Attorney General's been relying on a 110-year-old opinion. I think what's Jacobson versus Massachusetts, I think is the name of it, that came out of the United States Supreme Court. It basically says the governor can do under these circumstances, can do whatever he or she wants, and then we'll just sort it out later. There is substantial body of law now that is not the case. You don't sacrifice all of your constitutional rights in the face of a public health emergency. I would characterize it, because I've looked at this issue, and I know that Jackie has and Rachel have, on a number of different cases, and it's not. I don't believe that it is settled. I have a personal opinion about it.
I'm sure you do.
I understand an emergent situation. We all do. I am not willing to sacrifice the rights in the Organic Act, even in this sort of situation. I think there are other ways to thread this needle, and because that's just an opinion. I'd ask what Jackie and Rachel think.
Yeah, you know what, Chris? Am I glad that Tom, Rachel, and I, and you and Jason are all COVID-free? Yes, I am. But do I believe that the government should have unfettered right to lock any of us up in the event that one of us gets COVID? No, I don't believe that the government has unfettered control. And this is not a novel legal opinion that just the three of us came up together in a room and decided that we were going to challenge. Okay. Yeah. You know, I mean, even as recent as the last month, I think our United States Supreme Court said that California cannot apply rules differently to different bodies. I mean, just recently they struck down a California law that prohibited people from gathering in their homes to pray with more than 3 households. But California allowed 5, 10, 20 different households to gather in a restaurant. So this is what we mean by kind of unfettered control, right? Is they shouldn't have that type of unfettered control. To create an environment that's safe for our people of Guam, I think we all agree with that. But there has to be a balancing. And whose job is it to do the balancing? It's the entire legal system. We work together. And that's what we hope to see, is that there is a kind of this working mentality where the legislature is doing their job, the judiciary is doing their job, the lawyers are doing their job, right? And we're all hoping that we're working together. Well, the bottom line is that it's very clear from this decision that there was one party who was not working with us. And it was public health in this instance. And, you know, in the short time that we've got as well, Chris, I want to put a shout out to the Public Defender's Office. You know, John Morrison and Brian Engelston are the ones who have taken up where we've left off, and they've taken over. So they are also arguing a case before the Supreme Court involving the quarantine cases. I understand it's supposed to be sometime this week, but they're doing a phenomenal job in trying to follow through with what the cases we began this whole time period with. So just a shout out to them that they're doing a fantastic job. It's not just the role of the attorney to protect the rights of people. It's the role of the entire legal system to ensure that we're doing right by people.
Okay, can I trick you guys into giving free legal advice now? Let's say that you're fully vaccinated, you're coming back into Guam. CDC guidance says you shouldn't have to quarantine. Governor Liu says, I don't care what the CDC guidance says, you're going in. What can people who are coming back to Guam fully vaccinated, or even not, like, what do they say? What do they do when they get to the airport?
Can I take this time?
Yeah, Rach.
Yeah, I actually represented a client recently who posed this issue. He was vaccinated coming in from Hawaii. It never got to the courthouse because we were able to get his exemption and waiver, but that should not be the case. That should not be, in my personal opinion, that should not be the position that the government takes, is we're going to pick and choose which CDC guidelines to follow, which has been the government's position all throughout these quarantine matters, is, well, without any real justification as to why certain guidelines are adopted, why certain CDC guidelines are adopted and why certain ones are not. But I can tell you that the Public Health Authority is not adopting that provision of the CDC guideline, at least as recent as, I want to say, 2 or 3 weeks ago, right, when the guideline was issued. So based on my personal experience with public health, they have not adopted that guideline and they don't intend to do so. But who knows, maybe they've changed their tune since then.
I don't think they have. But, you know, it's interesting because they were promising us that if we were good boys and girls and we went out and we got our little vaccine shots, and then Auntie Lou is going to get a medal and a sticker if we got the pat the half, and then residents would not have to quarantine. Well, we held up our end of the bargain. We were good little boys and girls. We went and we got the needles in our arms and we did it. We got the pat the half, but a day, the quarantine's still in place for at least the next couple weeks. So I know people who were planning to come back who were banking on this after May 1st because they wanted to come for the summer or whatever. They wanted to go see family. Now they're on their way and they're going to get, well, they might get stuck, right? So, I mean, it's pretty frustrating, I think, for people.
Yes, indeed. It's extremely frustrating. And you know, I joined Jackie and Rachel, you know, hats off to Public Defender Service Corporation. And of course, up at Adelup, you know, there's not really a clear answer. Of course there's not. But one thing we can say is we need to take the least restrictive actions possible. We're not, we shouldn't be, you know, sweeping the streets for people just to throw them in, you know, government quarantine. If it's possible. If it is possible, which clearly it is, for somebody to quarantine at home, you know, that's been a successful program. Well, let them go home. You know, let's not put them in a jail for 14 days. And that's particularly true, I think, when the Centers for Disease Control is saying it's not necessary. Why are we having this continual, ongoing, rolling public health emergency that people are, you know, using to exercise powers that they never had before?
All right. Well, it's been great, guys. Good talk. Jackie, anything in closing? You kind of been looking like you want to say something, but you don't want to say something, because I want you to say something.
No, you know, Chris, it's really important. This particular month is Law Month, essentially. We just had a proclamation at the governor's, with the governor's office, over Law Month and the importance of the rule of law. And so, you know, in this time, during this particular period, we get this decision out that says the government didn't follow the rule of law in this instance. And this only highlights the importance of people being involved, people speaking up. Because like my EK family, if you remember them, there was a husband and a wife and their 5 children traveling to Guam. The mother passes away, and then the father dies as well. And in the meantime, this entire EK family was being locked up in a hotel, you know, and leaving the mother who had traveled ahead of them, right? The mom, the wife, right? Raquel was her name, leaving her alone to deal with the death of both her mother and her father, and not having the comfort of her husband and her children in the worst moment of her life, essentially. In fact, you know what, I don't know if I said this when she was interviewed, but the same thing happened to her when she was just a little girl. She lost her biological mother and father to a car accident. Her mother and father died a week apart. And then 40 years later, she comes back to Guam and her mother and father die a week apart. So, you know, the circumstances of people are so important. And this is why we say you cannot just make a rule that applies 100% across the board. And the law doesn't even do that. We don't have laws that really you can apply to every specific circumstance, except due process. You know, due process is critical. Without due process, we would not be the kind of country that we so profess our pride in. So that's what I'm saying. As the president of the Guam Bar Association, I am celebrating Law Month today.
Wow, man! So the AG is going to get a frowny face for obstructing justice during Law Month. You don't get a gold star.
Say, Chris, one more thing. Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
Is when Igros's decision first came out, it came out on Constitution Day. So the fact that this decision comes out on right before Law Day, and I think, at least as an attorney, that really gives me all the warm feels inside.
That's how you guys get your feels. Okay.
Let's not go there, Chris.
I know, I'm just saying. Okay. Well, thank you guys. Yeah, I know, right? Well, no pun intended, but it's been good holding court with you guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for
the opportunity.
Of course. Jackie, remember that thing I called you about? Call me back.
I know.
Okay.
We have another great idea too.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if you've heard, but we've got all these great programs going on. We're doing a Special Olympics next weekend. We've got this Manumpu program going on.
Good,
I mean,
right.
really, we've got some really great programs for the community going at this time.
Designate your
So I will be in
Tintago.
touch.
Yeah, designate your Tintago to come on and tell us about it. Okay, we'll see
All
you.
right,
There you
I'll
go.
do that for sure.
That's that. Oh, that was great. We got to take a really quick break, and we're getting another, not just a lawyer, but a judge.
Chief Justice.
Yeah, a former Chief Justice who's now wearing the public auditor hat. VJ Cruz is coming up next, and then we're going in with Ron.